Hello and welcome to Weekly MTG. I'm your host, Blake Rasmussen, and we have two amazing guests today who are going to run us through the entire deck, Temur Roar, coming from Tarkir Dragonstorm. So that commander deck is stacked with dragons. We're going to spend most of the hour probably just making dragon noises. I think just roar. We're going to reveal the entire deck, all the new cards, all the reprints, all the updated art, everything over the next hour. And to do that, I have two fantastic guests here. Why don't you introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Megan Smith. I'm a game designer here at Wizards of the Coast, and I was the lead of this product.
Hey, I'm Melissa DeTora. I'm a senior game designer, and I was on the team for this product, and I was the designer of the Dragon deck.
And so before we dive into the full deck, a little bit of news and a few reminders. So Magic Con Las Vegas is coming up in June. This is the can't miss Magic event of the year. Early bird badge sales, that for some reason is really hard to say really fast, and ticketed play registration for Magic Con Las Vegas are on sale right now at mcvegas.mtgfestivals.com. We are currently doing early bird pricing. So early bird pricing is going to be available on all adult badges until March 28th at 10 a.m. Pacific time or while supplies last. So make sure you don't miss out if you are planning on attending MagicCon Las Vegas. Vegas is always a good time. Also, we're going to talk about the partners and ambassadors for this set. Tarkir Dragonstorm is doing something a little bit different with the ambassador program this time. The ambassadors got to choose a clan to captain. These captains will be the go-to resource for ways to play Abzan, or cool Jeskai combos, or whatever else the other clans do. A handful of our ambassadors are unaligned, and they're open to recruitment. That's the folks down at the bottom there. But viewers should keep an eye on their content until release to see how they go. And of course, if you actively want to recruit them, go check out their content, go talk to them, go see what they're working with, and see if you can convince them to go into your favorite clan. All right, now let's talk about dragons. So let's start with let's put up the face cards. So we've seen the face cards before, but this is the final commander deck that's being revealed. So I think this is a great opportunity before we dive into the individual cards to kind of talk about the overall structure and how these decks were all put together. 5 is not a number we always do. Obviously, we wanted to do clans, but talk a little bit about developing this as a whole.
Yeah, so when we're going back to a factionalized plane like Tarkir, like Streets of New Capenna, there's 5 really identifiable groups, and we want to represent all of those. So coming back to Tarkir, obviously we have to do all 5 clans. So having 5 decks was like bare minimum, must have. I don't think anybody was going to argue that that was not a good idea. So we had Adam Prozac on the original Vision team because he's a huge Tarkir fan. He designed the main set. He was the lead for the main set. We brought him onto the team to kind of give us a deep dive into what really feels like Tarkir, what would be good throwback ideas for themes, or what can we do that's kind of new for the clan. So for the Temur deck, it was just so obvious we needed a dragons deck. This is what the whole set is about, is all of these dragons. Temur have always been about big animals, companionship, things like that. So dragons deck was slam dunk easy.
There are so many dragons.
There are so many dragons. I feel like every dragon on the plane is probably in this deck. The other clans were a little bit trickier to figure out what their identities were. We wanted to, pay homages to the old clans of kind of things that people would find familiar, but also new. So the Abzan Toughness deck kind of goes back to the old Frontier Siege and not Frontier Siege, the Toughness Matters theme that was in the original. But so we wanted the high walls of the Abzan to matter, the high toughness of the Abzan. The Mardu, the Horde mechanic, was just so perfect for wanting to go wide in Commander, so we adopted that really early. The Sultai have this new theme with the lands. They're more connected to the earth. We really wanted to play into lands matter, but also kind of the graveyard stuff. So that's how the Sultai deck came around. And then the Jeskai Matters deck, or the Jeskai deck was Flurry pretty early on, because that's just another fun mechanic that plays well in Commander.
All right, so let's talk about this deck specifically. We already revealed the face cards, but this set did something a little bit different in that kind of both face cards are meant to lead the deck. But talk about the development of these two cards.
So Ireni was really hard to pin down. We tried a whole bunch of shapes. We tried shapes that started off small and grew in size or got better the longer the game went around, the longer the game went. And after a while, we just thought, this isn't what Dragons players want. They don't want incremental value. They want big, giant monsters in play. So we just scrapped all of the small designs that were under 5 mana, and we're like, let's go big. We want something giant, impactful, splashy, explosive. So we went high up the curve, and we're just like, dragons that get you more dragons is what I think a Dragons player would want. So Ireni started off small and ended giant, which I think is just super apropos. And then Eshki, we kind of went back to that small and grows big theme, because we're like, the humans aren't giant. The humans aren't big splashy monsters, but they can become very big and powerful. So I liked making Eshki kind of the small to get big design. Eshki also went through a bunch of different iterations, but has always been kind of a power 4 matters. And we kind of honed in on this escalating power matters thing where it's 4, 6. I tried to get 8 power matters on there, but there wasn't enough room on the card, so we ended up just going with 3 cool abilities instead of 4.
All right, and everyone's going to kind of pick their favorite, which they want to lead the deck. What's your personal favorite?
Of these two?
Of those two, yeah.
Eshki is my deal. I love casting big creatures. Just having my deck built around a very specific theme is really fun, and I just love her art. She's so beautiful.
Yeah, she is, absolutely. All right, let's start taking a look at new cards, and we're going to start. Oddly enough, you did this whole spiel about big dragons and huge dragons and 4 power matters. Let's start with a tiny one. Let's go a little. So we've got Deceptive Frost Kite here for 2 blue. It's a 1/1 dragon with flying. And you may have this creature enter as a copy of a creature you control with power 4. There's that power 4 matters. Or greater, except it's a dragon in addition to its other types, and it has flying. So this is an interesting one.
Yes, I know I said big creatures matter is the thing, but I really like the idea that all sorts of dragons pop out of the Dragonstorms.
Yeah.
Giant dragons pop out of the Dragonstorms. We've seen all of those. But there are tiny dragons. I worked really closely with world building to try and get the idea of like, well, how can a small tiny dragon survive in Tarkir between the clans and the other wild dragons running around? And we thought of this really cool idea where the tiny dragon has to disguise itself. It has to set up like an illusion around itself to make it seem like it's bigger than it is. And that's how it kind of survives in this really hostile area. So that's kind of how we landed on this. Tiny dragon becomes a clone that is giant dragon.
Now, we were also talking before the show about some of the challenges with designing blue dragons. Red dragons, super easy. Green dragons, also challenging. But this is an interesting take to me on a blue dragon.
Yeah, I'm currently actually the blue color pie counselor, so finding cool blue things to do is kind of my job right now, is making sure we make blue not just the counter spell color, yes it does that, but what's fun and proactive about blue. And I think cloning is one of the uniquely very cool things that blue has that I like to protect and make sure blue has the coolest versions of. So of course I needed a cloning dragon among my blue dragons.
Yeah, I also want to add about this card, like, the unique thing about this card is I don't think we've done a 2-mana clone since Phantasmal Image, which was how long ago? Like
forever ago.
Like over a decade ago. So this is like a pretty novel effect. Phantasmal Image is very strong. So we wanted to just find a way to like go back to Phantasmal Image and make a really cool 2-mana clone that's also like at a good power level and also is a dragon and has flying, which is very cool and unique.
Yeah. All right, let's check out. Oh, also, I will note, so the extended versions, for those who are looking for what versions to get where, so we're going to show off some cards that have extended versions. The extended versions can be found in collector boosters. The pre-constructed deck will come with the regular version. All right, let's move on to a slightly bigger dragon. Here is Hammerhead Tyrant, also blue, slightly bigger. So for 6 mana, for 2 blue, you get a creature dragon. It's a 6/6 flyer. Whenever you cast a spell, return up to 1 target non-land permanent an opponent controls with mana value less than or equal to that spell's mana value to its owner's hand. This one immediately evokes something like, it's less busted, but like Tidespout Tyrant comes to mind when I look at this.
Hullbreaker Horror, I think, is the more recent one that people have nightmares about.
Yep.
Yes, making a fun version of those cards was definitely tricky. Melissa, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, sure. So one of the challenges with making an all dragons deck is your deck is full of big, dumb creatures and ramp, and you don't really have a lot of room for interaction. So we wanted to devote some of the new card slots to some interactive spells, but we also needed to devote new card slots to dragons. So we had the perfect opportunity to make a big dragon that was also interactive, and we couldn't just like be like, you know, ETB return something. We had to kind of give it that like constant interaction. So we had to try and find something that was an appropriate power level. Like Hullbreaker Horror is a little bit too frustrating, but like this version that cares about mana value is a little bit like more the power level that we wanted here.
Yeah.
So a lot more fun.
Yeah, it really rewards you for playing all those big expensive spells, right? Dragons decks really want you to play 5, 6, 7 mana spells. So making sure that you can bounce almost anything with your dragons when you cast them is that really good feeling of the bigger your spell is, the more likely you can bounce the thing that's, you know, going to kill you the next turn.
Okay. Let's move on to a non-dragon card that nonetheless says the word dragon, has a dragon on the picture. So it fits. Here's Will of the Temur. So people at home may notice this is part of that cycle. We'll talk about that in a moment. 5 and a blue for a sorcery. Choose one. If you control a commander, as you cast the spell, you may instead choose both. The first mode is create a token. That's a copy of target permanent, except it's a 4/4 dragon creature with flying in addition to its other types. And then target player draws cards equal to the greatest mana value among permanents you control. So, as I noted, this is part of a cycle. You were talking earlier about how the cycle came to be.
Yeah, so the cycle happened because Melissa submitted a card design early on that was just a one-off spell for the Mardu deck that ended up being the Will of the Mardu. Basically, almost word for word what it is now printed in its final form, minus a little bit of life gain. But I saw that and I was like, you know what is really cool? Cycles. And when we have a chance to do 5 decks, it's really fun to do a full cycle because you have one to put in every single deck.
Yeah.
So we talked about what the cycle should be and how it should look and what it wants to encourage players to do. I really loved the Wills cycle from Commander Legends, Jessica's Will, Sock's Will. Those I think are really great. They encourage you to cast your commanders, make sure they're in play to get the maximum value. From there, we tried to figure out what the colors should be. We could just put a random color in each deck, but the whole point of returning to Tarkir is the return of the 3rd color of each clan. So each will is the 3rd returning color that each clan is regaining. And we're trying to evoke what is new about the clan or what has returned to the clan in terms of their philosophy by the return of that 3rd color. So trying to make sure, you know, blue is a color of wisdom. Drawing cards is often associated with intelligence or wisdom or knowledge. So drawing cards was kind of an easy one to put on here. And of course, it gets you an additional dragon into the deck for its other mode.
Yeah, I'll also add that this cycle in particular was very hard to design, so I was a little bit skeptical of the cycle. Like, I liked the Mardu one, like, that was exactly what that deck wanted, you know, make tokens and removal. But I was a lot more skeptical of designing a full cycle of these, especially because, like, Wills in particular, if you control your commander, you're trying to make both modes appealing to cast if you don't have your commander. But also at the right power level if you do have your commander. So, like, getting the right numbers on these was just like super, super tough. So I don't know, I'm pretty happy with this one though. Like this one seems to have landed in a good spot and looks fun, so we'll see.
I think they all look fun, but I'm biased.
All right, let's move on to, let's go back to a dragon. Let's introduce Parapet Thrasher. So this is 2 red and a red for a creature, dragon, obviously. Whenever 1 or more dragons you control deal combat damage to an opponent, choose one that hasn't been chosen this turn. You can destroy target artifact that opponent controls. You can deal 4 damage to each other opponent. It's the Parapet Thrasher dealing that damage. And then you can also exile the top card of your library, and you can play it this turn. So we've got a little bit of a more mid-rangey sort of dragon here.
Yeah. The Dragons deck, as we were building it, we found that it has a lot of holes kind of at the lower mana values. We have a ton of ramp, a lot of 4-mana ramp spells, a lot of just getting lands into play. But there weren't a lot of dragons to play at those early curves that you'd be really happy to play. So we really wanted to target lower cost dragons as well as high cost dragons to make sure that Dragons players could fit as many dragons as possible into the deck. At every point in the curve, you can have a dragon. So this one kind of came around. The goal of this card throughout design was mid-range utility. We just wanted a dragon that kind of did a little bit of everything. You were happy to play in almost any situation, either early or late. Because it says whenever one or more dragons deal combat damage, you can play this and then attack on the same turn to get the value.
Yep.
And that was just really important to make sure that the Dragons deck could feel like it was always on the front foot, kind of like always attacking or always moving.
I'll also call out the multiplayer aspect of this card. This is telling you to damage 3 different opponents so you can get all the things.
Yep.
And one thing that we were trying to do was differentiate dragons between this deck, or like the Commander product, and the main set. So we tried to like find multiplayer aspects of the cards we were designing.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. I missed that on my first read through. I was like, okay, so you'll get one of these once per turn. But yeah, in my head I was like, are we trying to get additional combat here? But no, the answer is attack everybody. Just burn everything down.
Yep.
All right. Next up, we've got Thunder Mane Dragons. So we've got another 4-mana dragon here, 3 in a red this time. 4/4 flying. You may look at the top card of your library at any time. Great. You may cast creature spells with power 4 or greater from the top of your library. If you cast a creature spell this way, it gains haste until end of turn.
Yeah, this is a little bit of an experiment. We wanted to try something new for red, which is being able to cast spells from the top. You've seen a little bit in the past. There's a couple of cards. Experimental Frenzy was in standard. Loved that deck. Like so, it was super fun. So wanted to kind of go back to that and say, like, how can we make a cool red future sight effect here? This is a power 4 matters, so it's not just dragons. This is kind of meant to go into a variety of different decks, but it is itself a dragon, so hopefully you would find a home in your dragon's deck.
Yep.
And giving the creature haste when you cast it off the top just felt like a really cool, aggressive thing that red would care about.
Yeah, and that dragons want to do. They want to get into play and attack. Sometimes you cast your big dragon, they have to just sit there. Wait for a whole turn cycle.
That doesn't seem very dragony to me.
It doesn't seem very dragony.
Patience in my dragons? No, thank you.
We'll see a couple more haste enablers as we go through the deck as well. All right, next up we have Zenith Festival. There's an interesting story behind this harmonized card, Melissa.
Yeah, so this card was originally in the main set, and as play design was iterating, they decided to cut this card to make room for something else. But the Commander playtesters loved this card. We had so much fun playing it, so we were pretty bummed that this card was cut. So we decided to just take the card for the Commander deck.
Yep.
Yeah, and this one, you know, we've seen a lot of big dragons so far. I love the interaction between Harmonize and just having huge creatures out.
Yeah.
If for whatever reason you're not attacking, although you should be attacking, but if you're not, maybe there's, I don't know, an ensnaring bridge in play. Someone's being that person.
Or your dragon just doesn't have haste yet. What is he doing?
There
he's
you go.
Oh, yeah,
he's sitting
sure.
around twiddling his claws. Harmonize plays great with the power 4 or greater theme that the deck has.
Yep.
You've got those giant dragons, like we said, just kind of sitting around. One of the drawbacks of like big draw spells is you have to spend all of your mana drawing the cards or exiling all the cards. Harmonize is just a great way to convert dragons into mana.
Yeah.
So you have more mana to spend on the cards that you exile. It just plays really well. That's part of why we loved it so much in playtesting. Is it just had that great synergy with the dragons deck.
Yeah, makes sense. I mean, just being like you said, a lot of times you're paying, if you wanted to draw 6 cards or, you know, have 6 cards to go, this would cost you 8 mana. Are you going to be able to play all of them? Probably not. But if it's 2 red mana and tap a dragon, that's pretty strong.
I mean, I would rather cast spells than attack every time. So
I mean, I'm with you. I do have a dragon deck. It does like to attack. All right. Someone in chat said these last 2 cards better be green. Well, we've got a very green card coming for you next. This is called Become the Avalanche. For 4 green and green, you get a sorcery that says draw a card for each creature you control with power 4 or greater. Hey, we've seen that text before. We haven't seen it stapled onto this text, though. Then creatures you control get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the number of cards in your hand. Seems like it's going to kill some people.
Yeah, that is the hope. In a deck with a bunch of flyers, I think this definitely does kill at least one person, I would say. Maybe your least favorite person at the table. But trying to design a overrun effect that isn't all about killing your opponents is really hard. That's kind of what they're designed to do.
Yeah.
I really liked the idea of kind of turning these these finisher cards into multi-purpose. It's a secret modal card.
Yeah.
If you're not in a position to kill your opponents this turn for whatever reason, ensnaring bridges, who plays that card? You can draw a bunch of cards to try and get your way out of that situation, or to set yourself up for the kill next turn. The power bonus is really nice. Maybe it makes your opponents block with their really valuable creatures to survive. But the card is mostly about trying to get you ahead or get you a lot of options. Secret modal is one of my favorite designs.
Yeah, and sometimes overruns just sit in your hand because you don't really have the right board set up. So like having like a modal kind of overrun is it can be pretty nice.
Yeah, what were you calling this before the stream? You said there's Alpha Strike, and then
there's Beta Strike. Alpha Strike is about full send, everyone dies. Beta Strike is like value attack.
Maybe one player dies.
Maybe one player.
Chat, and to that point, chat was noting the lack of a lot of the time these kinds of spells come with trample. Is that why this one didn't?
This one has a lot of value baked into the first line of text.
Yep.
It feels like if you really want this to end the game, maybe work a little bit harder for it. It's already going to get you a lot up front. So asking the players to do a little bit extra of putting flying or vigilance trample on your creatures itself, I think was asking just enough.
Yep. All right, and then fans of green get one more treat here. We've got Brood Color Scourge. So 5, a green and a green for a creature dragon. It's a 5/7. It's a big one. It's got flying. Whenever one or more dragons you control deal combat damage to a player, so again, that spread the love kind of text, you may put a permanent card with mana value less than or equal to that damage from your hand onto the battlefield. I'm already dreaming of how many things I can put in play with this card.
3 things total. If you can attack all 3 of your opponents, or if you're in grand melee and attack everybody, maybe it's like 100 permanents. I'm not really sure. But this was another one of those kind of like secret haste cards, like the Parapet Thrasher. It works the turn that you played if you have other dragons in play. So secret haste, always great for these decks that kind of have to play one card at a time. But this is also trying to solve some of the problems of these big creature decks, which is you just kind of get choked on mana, you get choked on cards. You really just want to get as many things into play. We really loved the play pattern of it's just an explosive dragons deck. Dragons are popping out of everywhere. This one does ask you to kind of want to sculpt your hand a little bit, have the right permanents, and then if you don't, put a land into play. Like the floor being a land, not that bad.
Not that bad. All right. Hopefully you can do a little bit better than that. All right. Now we are going to move on. So those are all the cards that are going to come in sort of extended version and the regular version. So now we're going to move on to the section with some reprints that have new art or they're from the main set. There's still some spicy stuff in here. So first of all, the tried and true, the ever-present. We talked about these last week. We revealed them. They're going to be in your deck. They're there.
Yep. We've been really loving these on the design side of just giving people ways to customize their commander decks. I feel like I've seen a lot of positive feedback when people finally see the one that's for their deck or for them. And I just love keeping that trend going because eventually we'll get to your deck and your theme. And then you'll have your custom Soul Ring command tower for you.
And Dragon on a command tower is sweet.
Yes.
All right, next up we have a couple cards from the main set. So, Stormstreak Feral, Whirlwing Stormbrood, they're a common and uncommon. There are obviously a lot of dragons in the main set to choose from. How do you land on bringing these two in?
So we really loved Omen. It's kind of like Adventure, just gives you something to do early if you can't quite cast the creature side of the card yet. I particularly like these two because of the utility that they have in the decks in different ways. So Stormstreak Feral lets you discard a card, draw cards. It lets you filter your hand to try and find exactly what you're looking for. Maybe you need a couple more lands to cast your spells. Maybe you need a removal spell, more dragons. Just lets you kind of filter your hand to find exactly what you need or to smooth out your draws. And then it puts the dragon back into your deck so Rennie can find it later. So you're not down a dragon. if you put draw spells in the deck, you have to replace, that's a spot where a dragon could be. But what if your dragon was the draw spell?
Yeah.
I think that's the utility that a lot of people look for when split cards like these. And then Whirlwing Stormbrood, I really liked the dragon half of the card. Again, secret flash, or secret haste.
Yep.
Flash is kind of like haste. So it just lets you play always on the front foot, always ready to attack your opponents. And the counters are pretty nice to kind of buff up your dragons, make sure that they survive Blasphemous Axe or damage-based sweepers, or can just push through damage in the air.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I love the line attacks. You may cast sorcery spells and dragon spells as though they had flash. We'll see this deck has a number of sorceries in it where this is relevant, and of course it has 1 or 2 dragons. Speaking of dragons, there's also a suite of enchantments that care about dragons. 1 reprint and 2 from the main set. Anyone who's played a dragon deck and has ever cast Dragon Tempest knows how good that card is.
Yeah, this was a have to include, not like a must. There was no way we couldn't have a set called Tarkir Dragonstorm and not have a card called Dragon Tempest in the Dragons deck. Not just because it plays great in the deck, but the name, the flavor, everything. Getting new art that has the Dragonstorm on it was just super easy, just the icing on the cake. Just a slam dunk card that every Dragons deck wants and that just feels right at home in the deck. The Dragonstorms, we've seen these in the previews for the main set, played so well with the Dragons deck. Like, you have Dragons coming in, usually once or twice a turn. It's kind of hard to double spell, but that's what the Encroaching Dragonstorm is for. That's what the Breaching Dragonstorm is for. If you hit a dragon off of Breaching Dragonstorm and it goes right back to your hand, ready to reload for next turn, it's basically 5 mana for an 8 or less spell. You're going to go up on mana probably a lot of the time, given what I know about the contents of the deck. But they just played really well, were super fun, just really interesting designs.
Yeah. Now, the blue one is not in the deck. It's not on the screen, we can say that. Why is that? Why did you drop the blue one?
The blue one was really fun. It was really nice, like I said, for the red card that we saw earlier. Filtering your hand is really nice, but we did find that there was a limit to how many cards the Dragons deck could play and put into plays. So we're finding that we're discarding to hand size a lot of the time because you'd play a dragon, it would go back into your hand to kind of refuel you. It was really hard to empty your hand. So we thought that if you really like that gameplay or you really like it, pick it up from the main set. But we thought that these 2 Dragonstorms just fit the deck a little bit better for getting more permanence onto the battlefield, which is what the deck wants.
Yeah, and also the dragon deck just needs a really high density of dragons. So the more non-dragons you put in your deck, the less dragons like Areni is going to find, and the less dragons, your deck might not function as well as you want it to. So we had to make some sacrifices somewhere, so the blue one was the one to go. 2 Dragonstorms is enough.
Sarkhan would not agree.
Fair enough. Sarkhan is not a dragon, by the way.
All right, and then we have a trio of cards all with new art from lands. We've got Evolving Wilds, Frontier, Bivouac, and the Temple of the Dragon Queen is an interesting one, though.
Yeah, this was originally in Adventures of the Forgotten Realms. This was not a magic card for all intents and purposes, but we're like, we have our own Dragon Queen. Why don't we make a card for this? So you'll notice in the art, the crown of the dragon is really identifiable if you've ever seen the dragon Lathless. So this is our Lathless Temple of the Dragon Queen card. It also has Pseudo Behold on it. So if you've seen Behold a Dragon from the main set, it kind of evokes that same feeling of have lots of dragons, get rewards.
Yep, cool. All right, and then creatures. So there's a lot. And when we said this deck has a lot of dragons, that is a lot of dragons. Most of the cards you're looking at here are dragons. So we're going to go through and talk about a few of these. I want to start, Melissa, with a non-dragon, Nogi Draco Zealot. This was not a card I was familiar with.
Oh yeah, I was very familiar with it because I designed this card for a different product. It was designed for Game Night Free for All, which is a multiplayer 5-deck product that you're just meant to just play with a group of friends. It's not Commander; it's just multiplayer Magic.
Yep.
And each deck had a new card, and the red deck was a Dragons deck.
Yep.
And as we were saying, dragons are big and dumb and expensive, so you need some small cards to fill the curve, and I thought this card would be a pretty cool commander option for a dragon deck if you wanted like a low mana value commander. So here's Nogi. He's a kobold. He makes your dragons cheaper, and he's very cool.
All right, let's go back to the big one. So a lot of red here. Dragons are often red. What are some standouts here to the two of you?
Kaiga is a blue dragon, like we were talking about earlier. It's really hard to design blue dragons. I wanted to make sure that the deck felt like it was embodying all the colors of Temur and kind of had a little bit of everything. Green dragons are also a pretty new thing. Green flying has been a pretty contentious topic for color pie reasons.
Yeah.
But we always have a good dragon cycle that needs a green representative. So we had a chance to make new green dragons to kind of help fill this all out. But really, I think the majority of what dragons decks want to do is encapsulated in the red cards. It's usually about attacking. It's usually about dealing damage. Sometimes it's about having a lot of mana.
Yeah, a couple I'll call out. So a lot of the dragons here are just kind of obvious includes. They're just flying dragons. Makes a lot of sense. But there are some weirder ones that might like not make as much sense, but you know, when you think about it, they actually make a ton of sense. Like Torian Mauler, that's a secret dragon. That card has changeling. It's actually a dragon.
It's not that much of a secret. But yes, Torian Mauler doesn't look like a dragon, but yeah, that card's very good in dragon.
Yeah, also very good in multiplayer because it counts all players casting spells, so like it gets really big really quickly. And another I want to call out is Sarkhan, Soul of Flame. This is a card that a lot of people don't know about it because it was from one of the Aftermath products.
Yep.
So this is a low mana value card that you can just play early, and then later on, like your dragons are just going to get powered up because you have this in play. Like he's just going to get stronger. So.
Yeah. Well, and I like here too. You know, you were talking about this earlier, Megan, about filling out your curve, and you can see a lot of that here with Torian Mauler, with Gadrak. Even Dragon Master Outcast, which not a dragon itself, but makes dragons.
You will have dragons later.
You'll have many lands later.
You will have both of those things at a later point, yeah. And then, of course, if you're going to have the Laughless land, you got to have the Laughless card.
Yeah.
I mean, also that card's just really good.
The card's really good.
It's really good. All right, now, there are some actual spells in this deck. True story. So let's take a look at the 6 instants that are reprints. What would you like to share about these?
Just some pretty nuts and bolts removal spells and interactions, some that are specifically good in Dragon's deck. So Spit Flame is something that you can buy back the more dragons that you play. Draconic Lore, also just a really great on-flavor card draw. So in case you're kind of running out of steam, we were talking about the deck kind of getting its hand filled too much, but every so often you will run out of things to do. So nice to have something that rewards you for having dragons. It's cheaper to cast. But really just a wholesome little interaction suite here just to make sure that you can continue to attack with your dragons.
Yep, just solid staples that most commander decks of this color are just going to want to play anyway.
Yep. And then we've got the sorceries.
Oh, we got some ramp.
Ramp?
Yeah, just like pretty obvious includes here. Storm's Wrath, I think, is like just good flavor for Dragonstorm, so that was a pretty nice find. And probably one of the strongest red sweepers ever in multiplayer Blasphemous Act.
Yep. As a go big deck, Storm's Wrath is also nice because it won't kill all of your dragons.
Yep.
It will wipe out some of the smaller ones that we were talking about, but it usually leaves those big chonkers at the top end. But we'll wipe out all the little 1/1 tokens that Zergo's going to be making, wipe out all the monks with prowess the Jeskai deck is making, and leave mostly just the big things in play, which I think is a lot easier to manage for a Dragon's deck.
Yep.
It's likely to be the biggest creatures in play anyways. You just got to get rid of all the clutter every once in a while. And then Sylvala Stampede is one of my all-time favorite cards. I think it's super fun and exciting. A little bit of a mind game with asking your opponents, do you think that my hand has the really good cards, or do you think my deck has the really good cards? And then watching everyone argue with each other of how to vote.
All right. As we round into artifacts, enchantments, and lands, we will have time for some questions for our two guests. So if you have any questions about this deck or about the commander decks for this set generally, feel free to put them in chat. It helps me find them if you tag @magic at the front of them, and then I will pull what questions we can with the time we have left. All right, now let's go into a few artifacts here. Dragon's Hoard, obviously. We got Felwar Stone, Talisman of Creativity, and Talisman of Impulse. Anything you want to share about these?
good mana rocks. There is a little bit of artifact matters in the deck. We saw Gadrick earlier. He cares about seeing artifacts. Mostly you want lands in play, but it's nice to kind of have some fast mana to get those dragons out faster.
Yep, 2 mana ramp is important because a lot of the curve starts at 4, so good to have a bunch of these. And Dragon Sword is, like, I think this card is great because, like, it can be your ramp piece early and then card advantage later, so it's a really nice card for this deck.
Yep. All right, and then we've got 4 enchantments. These are all, each of these is going to have a pretty big impact on the board.
Yes, Reflections of Liara, I think just a great spell for typal decks. Choosing a creature type is just something that every typal deck wants to just say the one creature that I have 40 of in my deck, and then get copies of all of those. Elemental Bond just lets you draw off of a majority of the creatures in the deck. They're all 4 power matters was kind of the line that we were drawing, but Elemental Bond going down to 3 lets it see just slightly more creatures to get slightly more value. So we dipped into 3 power matters for this one. Frontier Siege, another card that we've seen in the past. It's got great flavor, obviously, but I think both of these modes are useful depending on what time you draw it. So if you draw it early, having the extra mana is going to be great. If you draw it late, having the fight and the removal is going to be so impactful. And then Temur Ascendancy, again, haste is so great, and here's the power 4 matters draw.
Yeah. All right, and then lands, the lands we haven't shown yet. I think the ones that make sense to call out, like Haven of the Spirit Dragon, obviously. Path of Ancestry, going to be a lot sharing a creature type. Mossworth Bridge, I thought was a cool inclusion.
Yeah, again, just being able to squirrel away or dragon away a big expensive card for later is really nice. Great for when you're kind of waiting for the setup, having a big creature in play. I love being able to cast it at instant speed. If you didn't know that, you can cast a spell even if it's a sorcery with Mossworth Bridge as long as you have the condition met. I love pointing out the landscapes that came out of MH3, Bountiful Landscape. It's a Evolving Wilds that gets a land of one of each of the Temur or of the Temur colors, but you can also cycle it away for Temur colors. I really think that those are super great, and it taps for a mana. It's better than Evolving Wilds. It also taps for a mana. But I think that's just a great card that more 3-color decks should be playing. There's one for each of the 3 colors. You should put those in your decks.
There you go. All right, and then basic lands. Here's some basic lands. They're pretty.
Just some lands.
Just some lands.
Just some lands. All right. We have time for some questions, so let's get to this. I thought this was an interesting, in the weedsy sort of question. So during design phase, how do you decide the right toughness for a creature card? So this one to me, and I don't know if producer Sean is able to bring this up, but was sort of a question I had in the back of my head when we looked at Parapet Thrasher into Thundermane Dragons. So they were both 4 mana dragons. One was a 4/3, one was a 4/4. So I did think that that was an interesting question about how you look at toughness, especially in Commander.
Yeah, it's different for each card. So this card provides a lot of value. So when cards can kind of sit back and do things without needing to get into combat damage, I think this provides a little bit more value than the other one does, just because it has more utility, so it can be more flexible in what it's doing. I like those cards to be a little bit more interactable, so it get hit by your Abrades, get hit by your 3 damage sweepers. Just make sure that those impactful cards can really be hit. I think the other dragon wanted more toughness just because it is sometimes a little bit more difficult to use. You'll hit lands, instant sorceries, you saw a lot of those in the deck. So I think that just giving this a little bit more toughness, making it a little bit harder to get rid of so you can see it, you have to untap with it as well. So you can see it do its thing, I think is important. And then just making sure that the dragons in each of the decks can kind of trade away with each other at different points. Some of them you want to be able to attack proactively into others. Into other decks. So for instance, Narset and Shiko is a 3/4, I believe. Maybe it's a 4/4. We want to make sure that dragons can either survive against that or be able to attack into it.
Or on the other hand, we might want them to die in combat easier if like the card is very impactful, like the 4/3 that we saw earlier. That's harder to get into combat with that guy because it trades with more things. So sometimes we will lower toughness if like our goal is to have it not be on the board as long as like something with a higher toughness.
Yep. All right. We knew we'd get this question. Miram is a very popular Temur-colored dragon. Why was it not included in this deck?
So Miriam is an extremely powerful Magic card. When we design precons, we try to make it so that there isn't a secret third commander that maybe seems better than the other commanders. I
Sure.
think Miriam is at the power level that is maybe above precon as
Okay.
well. And if people open up the precon and say Miriam, Ureni might look sadder in comparison. I think that Ureni is a really great addition to any Miriam deck. I think Ureni can also hold his own against Miriam decks. They're both kind of operating in the extra dragons on board space. But I think it's important to make sure that the face commanders have their time in the sun.
Yeah.
And Miriam has had her time in the sun. She's constantly in the sun.
Yes.
And just needs to give a little bit of breathing room to the other dragons.
All right. So we saw the layer of the Dragon Queen with Lathless. We saw Lathless in this deck. Is Lathless canonically from Tarkir?
I believe she is not, but I'm not the world building expert, but I believe we talked with world building about it and we thought it was okay. The worlds are blending more together with
Yep.
the omen paths. We've seen a lot of crossovers where, like in Aether Drift, people running through omen paths into 3 different planes.
Yeah.
So it's not unheard of that Lathless might visit Tarkir, not saying that she will, but it seems okay to kind of blend those lines a little bit better.
Yeah, and when designing decks, as game designers, it's gameplay over flavor for the most part. So even if Lathless might not be on Tarkir, we have to still include it in a dragon deck because it's a really fun card to play and just makes a lot of sense in the deck.
Yep. All right. Will the commander cards have foil printings in the collector boosters? I'm not sure. So your best source, there's an article on WeeklyMTG called Collecting Tarkir Dragonstorm, and that's going to give you a breakdown of all the different treatments and how everything can be found. I know for a fact in the past, the answer has been yes, that those extended commander cards could be found in foil, but your best source to have that absolutely 100% tidied up and how and where you can get them is going to be in Collecting Tarkir Dragonstorm. We did get questions about the individual art for Command Tower, Soul Ring, and Arcane Signet. Those 3 are the same art across all. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Okay, we have a question about the Abzan deck. I feel the Abzan deck has some identity issues trying to balance in between both commanders. Was this intended?
That one is a funny story. So Baitor's design came down really late. I would say that one was the hardest one to try and make feel different from the main set Baitor, which is also doing Toughness Matters.
Yep.
And Felithar was already doing the kind of like Doran the Siege Tower, make your defenders attack.
Yeah.
And it felt difficult to design another Toughness Matters card in the same space that both the main set Baitor and Felithar were in. So we kind of threw it to the wind and we said, let's just design a really cool dragon that feels Abzan, and kind of make it one of those like offshoot sideways build around. So the deck can support Baitor a little bit, but because it came down so late, it's not hugely supported like Eshki is. You know, Eshki will work with the deck perfectly. But the design came down late enough, but was cool enough that we were like, we can make it work. It'll be so much cooler when you build it into your own deck and you take it out of the precon. But it's still a dragon. It's still got high toughness, so it'll still be an effectual 5/5 with Felithar in play. That we were like, we'll eat the weirdness a little bit for a really cool design.
Cool. All right. Why not create a new ramp card? So ramp cards are very instrumental to dragon decks. Of the new cards, none of them are ramp cards, so I guess the question is why not create a ramp card? Why use existing ramp cards?
I feel like ramp cards are really hard to design at like the rare level. A lot of the ramp cards that you saw in the presentation were uncommons or commons, right? Kodama's Reach, Migration Path, things like that. Making rare versions of those are sometimes difficult to come up with where they feel natural. They don't feel like we forced it to work for the precon. So for me, what we did was we did a lot of like cheaty things. So Areni puts dragons into play. It's kind of like you've doubled your mana.
Right.
Same with the Scourge Brood, the big green one that also puts permanents into play. We want to find other ways for you to put the dragons into play that weren't just putting lands into play. Ramp is just really difficult to feel unique sometimes if all you're doing is putting lands in. So we've tried to put other ways into the deck that feel like ramping or feel like cheating on mana to get that same effect.
Yeah.
Also, the main set does have a new ramp card. It's the green Dragonstorm,
Yep.
and that card works perfectly in a dragon deck.
Yeah.
Also, like to Megan's point, these ramp cards are often like limited staples or for standard. So it makes a lot more sense for these types of cards to go in the main set over the commander decks, where in the commander decks we only get so many new card slots. So we want to make sure that they all matter, and like we have to make sure that the card slot is in the right place, which is why we have it in the main set.
All right, here's a fun one. Which clan is everyone's favorite? We'll start, Melissa.
All right, so mine is Temur. I don't know, like the combination of all three colors, like blue is card draw, green is big stuff and ramp. And I don't know why red is in there. I don't have a good answer for that one, but red is also cool. Yeah, I just like the gameplay of Temur the best out of the 5, I think.
Yeah, Sultai is my favorite color combination. The green is there for milling, the blue is there for milling, the black is there for milling. It all just really works together. It comes together in a great package. I designed the Sultai deck. That was my personally assigned deck. On the team, everyone was kind of assigned a different deck, but Sultai was my baby.
Yeah.
But it's always been one of my favorite color combinations. I love graveyard churning, where you're just kind of like moving cards between zones a bunch of times for value is one of my favorite game mechanics. So Sultai, 100% all the way.
Jeskai. Yeah, it's Jeskai. It draws cards, casts spells, cares about casting spells, cares about drawing
But
cards.
Temur does that too.
Temur does. Temur's pretty close.
And
yes.
you can cast more spells because you have the ramp.
That's true. That I do enjoy good Temur. Let's see. Okay, so a lot of the times we talk about the commander decks being built to sort of play in their environment together. So how do you balance I'll read the full question. You can agree or disagree with the premise, but how do you balance 5 commander decks? Feels like Sultai is busted compared to everything else. The lead here just told you that Sultai was her favorite, but go on.
So it's really interesting. So the Sultai deck does have weaknesses. It's an engine deck, which means sometimes it's slow to get the engine online. It's A plus B. You have to fill the graveyard and then have things that take things out of the graveyard. So there is a window of opportunity that the deck just gets run over. Right? It's a little bit slow. Once the engine does get online, it does play a really long game, really grindy. So to balance that out, we put in an aggro deck. There's a deck that just wants to turn its creatures sideways. Who do you think it's going to go after? The person that's just filling its graveyard and drawing cards? Probably. So making sure that each deck kind of has a natural enemy. So the Abzan deck is pretty weak to flyers, but it's got a really solid ground game. So it's able to fend off the Mardu deck and the Sultai deck, but then the Dragons deck can kind of soar over the top of a lot of the walls. The Dragons deck, because it's a ramp deck, can also get attacked underneath it by an aggro deck. So it's just making sure that you have a bunch of different archetypes kind of represented in there. The Jeskai deck is more tricksy because it can play kind of a little bit of a control game. It can also set up some creatures on the ground, and then those creatures, because many of them have prowess, can kind of turn into threats late in the game after everyone's kind of like beating each other up. You kind of slip in under there and just kind of like win the game out of nowhere sometimes. But
so Jeskai just gets left alone.
Sometimes it's got mana open a lot of the time. You got to be careful attacking into that deck. Exactly. So each deck kind of has its own strategy, and it's mostly about recognizing what your role is in the game when you play that deck. It's like, who am I? What am I? Who at the table is my biggest weakness, and how can I fight against that? And just making sure that you play smart. It's just like Magic.
Yep. All right, I'll answer this one. When is the follow-up to the bracket system announcement? Next month, late next month. We'll share the exact date as we get a little bit closer, but later next month, which I think we've said before. Was Tree of Perdition considered or removed from the Abzan deck?
It was in the Abzan deck for a long time. In a lot of play tests, it just killed people. And we try to make it so that there's not too many cards that just kind of, if you don't deal with them right away, they just end the game for one person. It's kind of feels bad to be the one person that gets targeted by it and then you get attacked or what have you. So it was in the deck for a long time. We ended up taking it out just because Tree of Redemption was already in the deck, and we kind of liked the gameplay of that card a lot more. But it was in the deck for a long time and was cut a little bit late in the process, but mostly for gameplay fun. If you love Tree of Perdition, definitely put it in. It obviously plays really great in the deck. I would absolutely expect it in an Abzan Toughness deck, but for us, we were like, the deck is already doing a lot of work. I don't think it needs Tree of Perdition.
Yeah, it's just a very warping card, and when that card is in play early, the game just becomes about it and just overall not a very fun card in like the self-contained 5 decks playing against each other game.
All right. Chat jumped. Let's see. Let's see if we can find. It's an interesting question.
Are you going to read it?
It was why no dragon of paradise. I think it's a
Like a
like
birds
a
of paradise.
Yeah. One day.
Honestly, didn't think about it, but
Well, you can play the new Mox from the main set.
oh
You
yeah,
can,
Mox Jasper.
You can add that to
Yep, you could
to
do
your
that.
commander deck.
Yep.
That can be your Dragon of Paradise.
There
Yep.
you go.
All right. Here's an interesting question. So dragons are often high converted mana cost. How often were dragon payoffs powered down due to low converted mana cost changelings existing? So like Taurian Mauler, that sort of thing.
I would say next to none.
Yeah,
Like,
I would say not so much. Yeah, changelings exist, sure, but we really wanted to capture the gameplay of the big dragon, so we didn't really worry about that too much. We do have Taurian Mauler in the deck, obviously, but yeah, we didn't really consider that all that much.
yeah, a lot of the dragons payoffs in the decks. I think the Parapet Thrasher might be the only one that really works well with changelings.
Yeah.
The large green one cares about damage dealt, and a lot of
Right.
changelings are just small little like 1/1s, 2/2s, except for Taurian Mauler, which is like a 12/12.
Yeah, like Lathlis is a good payoff. Like you can just like spam a bunch of changelings, or I
Yeah.
don't know, that artifact that makes changeling tokens or like tokens of the creature type of your choice or whatever.
Yep.
Yeah.
But that just feels pretty win more. I mean,
Yeah.
if you want to do that, go for it.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Less a question and more a request. Sure. Been a big fan of the story for Dragonstorm. Can you please pass on some high fives to the team? Gonna miss story during UB and hoping we get more story again soon. We will have more story again soon.
Cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
They'll appreciate that.
Let's see. Was there ever a consideration to bring back battles for this set, since there's a lot of conflict between the cons and the dragons?
Yeah, battles are interesting. So if we wanted to bring battles back for precon, I don't know if you've noticed this, but precons don't have double-faced cards.
Yep.
So we couldn't reprint any battles because it's a double-faced card from Mom.
From Martian
March
Machine.
the
Thank you
Machine,
very much.
yeah.
I get all the set codes mixed up when we go from like X, just like the set codes into the real ones. So we couldn't reprint any of the old ones, so we'd have to design a new kind of battle that was only one-sided, which seems really difficult to do for just like a one-off card in a precon.
Yeah.
It seems like something that a main set would want to do instead, where they can blow it out, they can do many different versions, but that's basically the main reason is battles are double-sided. We just couldn't print them.
Okay, so I think this is a good timing question. I've seen versions of this from a few people talking about the bracket system, game changers, and precons are mostly scoped towards level or bracket 2. But I would imagine that these decks were designed before the bracket system was, given that we did the bracket
Absolutely. We
system.
worked very early
yeah.
in the process. I believe a lot of the cards were designed in like summer of 23.
Yep.
So 2 years, close
Yeah.
to 2 years ago.
Yep.
So yeah, that was not really a thought back then.
Yep. Okay, so timing-wise, it's not going to line up, but I mean, I didn't see any game changers in these decks off the top of my head.
Gaia's Cradle? No. Boring Collects? No. Yeah, I don't think we had any game changes in here. We're still learning about brackets ourselves.
Yep.
Like, we're still talking about what should be on the game changers list. Some cards, we've gotten a lot of feedback of cards that people think don't deserve it.
Yep.
They were done wrong, and other cards that should be on the list. So saying a precon is a bracket 3 because there's a game changer in it kind of goes back to we're still learning about the system itself. So
Yep.
I would say when you look at the bracket system, it's always about intent.
Yep.
And it's always about what are you here to do in the game, like what are you trying to achieve or accomplish, and just communicating that with your group ahead of time.
Yeah, and we are still early in bracket systems lifetime. We're only in beta. There's going to be huge updates next month.
Yep.
So there'll be even like different cards on this list. So who knows? Maybe a game changer is in these decks next month. I don't know.
All right. So again, we talked about how the 5 are sort of built to be played in a sandbox. So how would these decks play in a 5-person pod? any fun setups that you would suggest?
For 5-person pods, my preference is the triangles system, the spheres of influence, where you are basically battling the person across from you. So instead of being in your wedge, you're attacking your shard.
Okay.
And your wedge is actually part of your ally almost, because if you lose, if you look at the way triangles work, if I'm trying to defeat the 2 people across from me, everyone else is also trying to defeat the 2 people across from them, and you win the game when you defeat the 2 people across from you. So you're actually incentivized to protect the people in your wedge and attack the people that are in your shard. So it's a really fun gameplay where it just kind of lowers the overall like free-for-all feeling, where maybe it's overwhelming to have to like prioritize who's the threat. And it's easier to say like, all right, guys, we'll protect each other here. These 2 are going to die, and then the politics from there is just super fun.
We used to play that back in the day. It was called Star Magic
Yep.
before Commander existed.
Yep. All right. We are going to call it there. We are just about out of time. So before we go, I want to thank our 2 fantastic guests for sharing more about these decks. This deck list will be posted on dailymtg.com at the end of the stream, or maybe already. I don't know. Next week, we are going to be back. We're going to talk about the banned and restricted announcement that is coming on Monday the 31st. So this is our normal cadence for banned and restricted announcements. We have them on Monday. We have a show talking about them on Tuesday to answer questions and dive into any of the changes. I'm not going to share who the guests are going to be because that would actually give away the formats a little bit. And then, as I said, obviously, you're all here because you're Commander fans. We will be back in late April to give another update on the Commander bracket system and any other changes that are happening to that format. So until then, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.